Welcome back, everyone, to the Roll the Credits podcast, where I, Liam, and the film connoisseur friend of mine, Rob, have rolled the credits on another film. What film have you pulled out for me this time, Rob?
It's a cult classic, my mum's favourite, The Lost Boys. And in some ways, I'm kind of shocked that you've never seen this before.
I'll be honest with you, I don't think I've even heard of it.
But, I mean,
we watched it.
that's what I find mental, because it's a quintessential 80s film. And, like, everyone knows The Lost Boys. Like, you even know The Lost Boys. You were talking about the guy at Eurovision, so you even by, like...
That wasn't him. I just said the sax guy reminds me of the sax guy from that Eurovision contest.
I thought the guy had actually shown up and done Eurovision.
No, I don't know if that's him or not. Just in Eurovision, when the famous sax guy has his solo, and it's like meme all over the world now, and the awesome sax guy, that's what he reminded me of.
I feel like he could actually be it, but I need to look at this. But I just can't believe that you've never seen
Look
this
completely
before.
different. Yeah, I've not even seen, not even heard of before. And to be honest, when you brought it up, and I briefly pulled it up, I don't like to see much about it. I just see, it's a film, and it's got vampires in it, and I think, vampires again doesn't. It's not something that appeals to me. Doesn't jump out to me. So I went into this one thinking might not be one that I enjoy as much as the films we've seen so far.
I mean, that's fair. I was surprised when you went all in and just bought it straight away, because usually, like, it makes me a bit nervous at times when you do that, because I'm like, fucking hell, I hope he actually does like this if he's bought this.
No. I feel like whether or not people ever listen to this, it's just so much fun watching films together and just talking about it this way in depth. Like, people with their mates who watch films may talk about it, but I really enjoy this, and I'd like to I want to buy everything we watch. I want to have and own. I don't want to rent it or anything like that. I want to actually have these physically. And in 10 years' time, I'll look back and be like, those are the films me and Rob did on that podcast that nobody listened to. That was a fun time. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
That is fair.
I'm going to buy all of these regardless.
So, I mean, for anyone that hasn't seen The Lost Boys, there can't be fucking many of you.
Actually, I'd like to know this. And people who watch this are probably more likely to have seen it. But I hope that there's a couple of people out there might be like, you know what?
It depends on where do you draw the line? Because someone who was born in 2010 is probably not fucking seen it. But people our age, people who were like 29, 30, like they've.
It's 6 years older than I am, so.
Yeah, but so was the Aliens and fucking Alien and Predators, like fucking.
Yeah, but they're iconic, and
this is iconic.
Yeah, but they've got loads of films released since then that kept it in the public eye. People kept talking about Alien because they keep throwing more shit out, video games out, tabletop RPGs out. There's more to keep the conversation going.
I suppose I'll give you that. I mean, there were two dog shit of two, maybe even three.
Yeah, when we finished the film, I did pop it up and saw that, and they just, from what I can see from the outside, looked like the worst money-grabbing sort of piece of craps ever.
Of the ones that I've watched.
Waste my time watching those at some point.
Nah, not on my time.
I don't know if like true lovers of this film might still appreciate it in some way.
I'll be honest. I bet true lovers of this film
hate it.
But they probably don't even know that they exist, because that's how like straight to DVD they were. Unless like you're like it depends, I suppose, on what you define as like a true lover. Like my mom fucking loves this film, but would she have ever watched the straight to DVD ones? Would she even know they exist if I didn't tell her?
Yeah,
no,
true.
She wouldn't fucking know. So it depends on what you class as like a film lover, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, speaking of your mum, and before we talk about the plot a bit, usually we get our own sort of quick one-line or short review. But considering you told me this was your mum's favourite film, I said, let's get her review. What has your mum got to say about her favourite film?
So this is coming from, the Queen Bee herself. So I said, tell me what you like the most about it, and I'll bring it up on our podcast. And she says, great soundtrack, a mix of humour, vampires, some great one-liners. You're either in the David or Michael camp. Which, when I read that, I thought, I've never really thought that I'd be in the David camp, considering he's
I
a
don't think I was
fucking
in either of
vampire.
their camps, to be
Considering
honest.
he's in a fucking vampire that's like killing people and deliberately like
Yeah,
kidnapping
that's true.
kids.
Yeah.
I
No, I think your
literally,
mum's sort of opened up a bit of a personality to us there.
yeah, but she's like, either one will keep you on the edge of your seat. And that I mean, for the most part, besides the questionable David
Yeah.
camp,
I'm now
I
worried
would.
if your mum became a vampire, she'll be out trying to
Oh yeah, I
cause
mean,
shit in society.
she'd be trying to be on the back of Kiefer Sutherland's bike. She'd be sore. She'd think she was anyway.
Well, to be fair, she's put my one-line reviews to shame. That sounded like, the quote that I put on a movie for a review, to be fair. So she's done a good job there. We might have to pull her in more often.
Absolutely.
But,
so what would yours be then? How would you compare?
I just think, to sum the film up, just a good old 80s action bit of fun. That's what it felt like to me. It's not an amazing film. It doesn't blow anything off. It's not. I don't think it's that special. It's just a good bit of fun. Like if I don't really plan to have kids, but you never know. If I had a kid and we're sitting down, they're 10 to 12 years old, I think, we're going to watch this film. It's funny. There's supernatural stuff in it, but it's a bit funny. It's not scary, so they could just go in and have a laugh with it. I feel it's that perfect film. I actually, if there was a competition, and they said, right, we're going to have a competition. Everyone picks one film. They've got to pick the most stereotypical 80s film. Like, pick one film that just sums up looks like the most stereotypical 80s. This is what I'd pick. This is what I think of when I think of American 80s. I think of the hair and the clothes, and they're on the pier with the colours and the music, and it was
It's
perfect.
Definitely a very
of the stereotypical 80s.
Yeah, I would agree with that because you have the hair, like the outfits, everything's a bit flamboyant.
Yeah,
and
even the way they talk is it's brilliant. Especially Sam. He's so stereotypical. The things he says, it's just funny. It's not amazing. It's just so funny and fun, and that's where this film exists. I think it's just good fun.
It's a film that I like, even though it perfectly captures like the 80s. I don't know whether it's just because like the 80s was kind of like its own sort of like fucking fantasy decade where people just did whatever the fuck they wanted. But I always think that this film's kind of like in a way timeless because it has its own sort of it has its own style to it that not many films kind of have. Like it just sort of is its own thing. Like you said, the music's just like blaring away, like on the big moments.
It felt like every 5-10 minutes, another big 80s smasher was just playing as it went through, and it just kept the energy going. And it just, it really did that well.
Yeah, it's definitely.
I don't think it could ever feel out of date or old. Like you watch it and go, "Oh, it hasn't kept up," because it engulfs the era it's in so much
it
that
doesn't
it almost
really incorporate like many things that would be dated as well. The only thing like that might be dated would be like the idea of a big like.
I mean, it's dated. It's 80s, but it just doesn't feel. It doesn't, it's not grinding.
No,
There's
but
nothing in there that grinds you because it's.
But I mean, like you don't like, other than like in the video shop, you don't really see any technology that, like, because Grandad doesn't have a TV, and like.
But again, I feel that is part of the 80s and that time. It's not.
Yeah, but I'm saying like I'm saying when you're watching it now, like. We talk about like shit CGI and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's kind of none of that in the film. Like not really that much CGI. It's all practical effects. There's no there's no outward like obvious references to the 80s in the film. Obviously, the 80s like influences the film, but there's no like I don't think there's anything that is like directly pulled from like 80s pop culture. Just sort of creates its own.
No, it just is 80s pop culture.
Yeah, so I mean, it sort of it uses everything about the 80s to create its own sort of world.
Yeah, it does that really good, and it really helped it just be great fun. So yeah, that's our one-line reviews turned into a big chunk of time.
yeah.
But to summarize the film, it's just a family, mother and her 2 sons, moving to a different part of the country. What is it, Santa Clara?
Yeah,
a small coast town in California, and
murder capital of the world.
As the boy brings up, and then they get there and shit happens. Vampires are there.
Yeah, and the older brother sort of gets honey trapped by the girl, who then proceeds to play the victim for the rest of the film.
Yeah, it's funny that, because at first I was like, oh, they're very quick to get infatuated by each other, aren't they? Blimey, like they're just straight into it. But I was like, oh no, vampires. That's sort of the mythology of the vampires as well, isn't it? They're charming and they draw you in and you fall into. So that sort of made sense. Yeah, so he's just stalking her, waiting for his chance to jump in.
There are all logical bits in it that don't fully make sense. So now I've watched it with you and I've sat and thought about it. Well, like, she says that Michael was meant to be her first, but then like they were teasing him beforehand, but then they were happy to just rip the fucking roof off of like that couple, and they like pick up the security guard. Fuck knows where he goes. The door comes off with him, and like, so like, what was he actually meant to be the first? And then like it's one of those films where like
meant to be the first, but then he sort of he fitted the crew. He didn't have the fear. He was willing to get involved. There's part of him just trying to impress the girl, but
that's true.
Maybe he was more to him that they expected. I thought he would be a good part of the group.
I could say it's one of those films where you can look beyond that sort of thing. It's just good time watching it.
Yeah, that's it. Just good fun film. And all the special effects and stuff, again, nothing mind-blowing, but it just fits the theme of the 80s. The special effects are so good at being 80s special effects that it doesn't feel outdated or wrong. It feels like it should only be that way. I felt like if you tried to remake it now and did it with CGI and did it with stuff, it wouldn't work.
If they
it has to be the way it is.
The only way that The Lost Boys works is, like we said, it incorporates the 80s so much that it just creates its own unique sort of world within the film. And there's nothing in the modern day that could even come close to the way that I can't think of any film that's come out in recent times that I could say like that director would be good to remake The Lost Boys, because it just nailed like that sort of vibe. There's no one that I just don't even think you could in the modern day. Like, you couldn't modernize the film. The only way you could remake Lost Boys is by setting it back in the 80s, and at that point, there's no point remaking it.
Why are you doing it? Yeah, the film is just so perfect for what it is in its moment that it shouldn't be any different. And everything about it, from the special effects, the setting, the soundtrack, the clothes, it was great. And I got so much. See, it's probably wrong. It should be the other way around. But because of the order I've watched things, I got so much from the 2 boys in the comic shop. I can't think of their names off the top of my head now.
Frog Brothers.
But one of them the whole time just kept making me think he was like trying to do a Sylvester Stallone accent. But Charles,
Corey Feldman with the one with the bandana.
Yeah, but every time I saw them and their acting, it was more cool 80s fun. It was so 80s, and it was just giving me such stranger.
I suppose he actually was, because this was like 87, 88, so Rambo was fully in its prime at this point. Like Rambo 3 would have been out.
Yeah, and they've got the red headband around his head.
Yeah, so it's fully embracing that, even though it's sort of like understated.
That's it. And it was giving me so much Stranger Things vibes. I was like, Stranger Things definitely took a lot. I feel like Stranger Things looked at this when making that to get that feel of the 80s and the way the kids act around each other.
This, E.T., Goonies, all of that influenced Stranger Things for sure. Like,
yeah, massively. I can see the impact this film has had, and I didn't even know it existed. I feel like
I believe it.
But it's cool because it's cool seeing things and now going, I always worry about that. And I know we're going to bring this up soon, but we're going to twist a formula coming up not too long ago. I want to show Rob a film that he hasn't seen that I absolutely love, like Planes, Trains and Automobiles. And I always fear people, when they watch that film now for the first time, it's going to lose some of its charm because so much has been taken out from it and copied that people feel like they've seen it. But in itself, it was so good.
That's where I'm different.
Yeah, but I feel this film, like I can see people having that worry as well when trying to show it to people, but it's just so good that that's just not a problem. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and it sort of doesn't try to be anything different. It's just it knows it's a good time, and it's making sure that you have the best time watching.
Yeah, and it's definitely will forever influence anyone that's trying to set something in the 80s and have that 80s feel. I feel like this is the perfect first step prep. I feel like if you get the team of writers and producers and things around, like, right, guys, make sure you've seen this because that's the feel of the 80s. You've got to get as close to that as possible. You're never going to be able to do it, but that's as close as we got to get.
Absolutely, because like you say, like even like the characters, like you say, the writing and all that. I mean, my favorite character like is Corey Haim's character for me, the younger brother.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, yeah, again, he was perfect 80s. His one-liners and his...
I feel like if you're talking about the film, it probably wouldn't be as funny and good as it is.
No, definitely not.
But then I feel like maybe all of the characters have their own part to play in it, and if you take any of them out, maybe it would impact it.
Well, I thought you were going to say Grandpa was your favourite.
I mean, Grandpa's
he's not in there too much, but every line is just a banger. Perfect 80s. He's funny. He's your funny granddad.
My mum always used to bring up the "don't need a TV if you got a TV guide." Because it's just mental. He's just a mental like line to think of. Like, but then when I sit and think about it, like. My grandma used to buy those TV guides when I was younger, and they literally do explain like the entire storyline for like the month or something of the show. So I can sort of realize in my head like why he would think that. Because if he just needs to buy that, doesn't need a TV because he just read it.
Oh, I had that at uni. Like there was a girl at university who loves all the soap operas. And she would read all the magazines and all of the things that were going to happen in the show before it happens. And I was like, what? Why would you do that? Like, why would you want to experience it and see it? And she was saying, no, I love it. I've got to read it. And I just couldn't ever grasp that. And she did say, like, she likes seeing it unfold and how they do it. But I don't know. I feel like you should enjoy it for what it is at first. And then you can do that afterwards because you know what happens and pull it apart if you want. But that always drives me mad. Why would you want to know before going in? I just want to...
It drives me mad, that sort of stuff. Well, like I say, like you can absolutely see why Grandad would feel that way at this point.
Oh yeah. Well, it was Grandad as well. Where at the end of the film, and it's like, okay, it's obvious what's going to happen here. Grandad's going to come in and save the day, but then he's going to come in and save the day. I didn't expect it. He just rams his car through the wall and just kills the fucking thing. And I was thinking, how the fuck does Grandad know what's going on in there to do that in that moment anyway? But I sort of said that out loud before it happened. I went, well, Grandpa's going to come and save the day, but how does he know what's going on in there? And then he smashes through the fucking wall, and it's all go up and kills the guy. But before he smashed through the wall, you're like, when I said, how does Grandad know what's going on in there? You said, you'll see. And then he gets out and just goes, one thing about living in Santa Clara I could never stomach, all the damn vampires. As if that was the answer. Like, fair enough then. That's how we knew what was going on. But still, because it's an 80s and because it is what it is, it's perfect. I wouldn't want it any other way.
No, not at all. Fucking great.
It's just so funny. I found it, yeah. I don't think I want to rewatch it too many times. It's a film that I'd like to... If I had kids, I'd love to watch it with my kid. But it was great fun.
I think David's quite a good character as well. Like, he has that sort of suave nature that Kiefer Sutherland just has, you know what I mean? Like, you didn't even realise it was Kiefer Sutherland, but I did. Then the iconic voice.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I felt so weird. I didn't see Kiefer Sutherland visually. I would have never have known. I don't know. Maybe I'm just blind. But as soon as he spoke, it's like, okay, his voice has never changed. I just imagined when he was born and come out the womb, it was like, "Hi, mum," and it was just his voice immediately. His voice, I swear, hasn't changed a bit since then.
It's not.
But just seeing him back in the 80s, it's like, bloody hell, he doesn't look anything like him at all.
I feel like he actually, like, you can tell he enjoys that role in the film because just
I feel like he had a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then like the Frog Brothers just like absolutely nuts. But I can imagine like people being like that in the 80s where they think that like they're going to be vampire hunters and shit.
Yeah. Great fun. It's perfect 80s action comedy, supernatural action, romp, laugh. Great fun.
Absolutely. But we had some debate about this film. Like
It's not debate.
Well, it's not even like relevant to the film. Well, it is, but it's not. It started off about the film, but I feel like it's just gonna rumble on for a while now. Like, for me, this film, and to most people on the fucking internet, like on IMDb and all that, this is classed as a horror comedy. But Liam does not.
It's not horror. This film is not a horror film at all. It's a supernatural comedy. There's supernatural stuff in it, but it's not trying to be scary.
But it's a comedy.
I don't feel it deserves the line horror. I'm not trying to knock it for it. I'm just saying it isn't. It's supernatural. There's vampires. Vampires in themselves doesn't make it a horror. Mona the Vampire, the kids' BBC TV show, is not a horror.
We talked about this. That's gateway horror.
It's not gateway horror. It's gateway supernatural. They weren't being scary. It's gateway getting them involved in the supernatural world and getting them to enjoy it.
But it's class. I believe
just because it's classed as horror comedy doesn't mean it's right. It's horror. It's comedy supernatural.
But
I don't think it's scary at all, and I don't think it's trying to be scary at all. I think it's trying to be.
But the horror doesn't have to be scary. But you think it does?
Cool. Of course, the definition of horror.
Okay, I'll give you. So, what would you class?
An intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust.
What would you class Aliens as then?
Yeah, but Alien is meant to be scary.
How is it?
When that alien's around and
that's a full-on 80s action horror, that is.
Action horror, exactly. It deserves the eternal. It's got action, and it's scary, but it's going to jump out. And visually, I hate it. Hate seeing the face hugger jump on a face and it burst out the chest.
There's full of.
I don't like it.
There's full of one-liners and comedy moments in Aliens. Like, I'm not buying this.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's not comedy in it. I'm saying it is a horror. As part of it. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's just a horror.
But someone who watches that couple and like security guard get ripped away in Lost Boys, someone could find that scary.
No, that was. Yeah, they might find it scary because they're a bit.
Well, they would class it as horror comedy.
Wimpy, but I don't think they're. I think they will be scared there because it's wimpy. I don't think the director's intending to be scary, or maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like it was trying to be scary. It was just trying to be funny, and it was just introducing that there's something going on in the town to let you know. It wasn't doing it scary. You're involved with the group from the start, and they're out having a laugh and having fun. It's not like the vampires, this unknown thing, and you've got to be scared of it. You're in their little home and their camp right at the start, and they're all having a joke with the laugh with the maggots and the rice and the worms and the noodles and you're gonna drink some blood. Yeah, of course it's blood, mate. Ha ha ha. It's not scary. It's supernatural.
Well, this is, for me, horror doesn't have to be scary, and it incorporates.
That's the definition of horror.
Yeah, but okay, but I'm redefining. You're redefining the film. I'm redefining the genre.
I'm redefining the film, and if they're saying horror comedy doesn't have to be scary, then I'm redefining the genre. That's it's not horror.
I don't think. And
perfect. Look, the first thing that comes up after my Google search is definition. What is horror? Horror is a genre of storytelling intended to scare, shock, and thrill its audience.
So, I mean, it's a thrilling film.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a thriller, but it's like an action romp. Yeah, it's exciting action, like fun 80s. It just doesn't slow down.
Okay, so I've watched a fuck ton of horror films, right? Since I was a kid, and I don't find horror films in the most part now. I don't find horror films scary.
See, this is where we're just getting wrong again.
Well, no, because
I'm not saying whether you find it scary or not because you've seen it all before and you're used to it. I'm saying the people making it intend for it to be scary. They're trying to scare an audience and have a jump scares and they're building up and you're scared. Oh, is it going to come out here? What's going to happen? They're intending for it to be horror. But this one, I don't think
supernatural comedy's the right term for it. So I don't know.
I don't think horror's the right term for it. I think it should be a supernatural action thriller, comedy.
Supernatural just seems like a real long word. Okay, and we've got
it's
a couple
not my fault they put more letters in that word than horror.
I've consulted with some of our friends for this podcast.
See, this is something I go to work and you go preparing your counter argument.
No.
I got no prep time for this.
No, I wanted to just consult and.
Right.
I've spoken to
Horror
Olivia
can also
about
be
this
defined
as
overwhelming, painful feeling caused by something frightfully shocking, terrifying, revolting, a shuddering fear. What in that film was any of that?
I see. Liv. When I spoke to her about this, she basically kind of, in her own way, agreed with you. And,
of course she did, because I'm right.
But when I've consulted with Paul and Lloyd earlier, yeah, Paul was sort of on the fence. He could see my point of view, could see your point of view. Lloyd was definitely on my side, and we both sort of agreed that.
No, I'm going to have some words.
Actually, all three of us sort of agreed that your definition of
when you went in and influenced the conversation in your way to grind out your result. If I was there from the start and we had a debate and then they had to decide who to pick at the end, I think you're
giving my powers of persuasion way too much credit there, to be fair.
No, I don't think so. It's like when we were debating about tipping bin men, and every time you tried to word the question, you always worded it as if like, this is weird, isn't it? Right? Like I
still think it is weird. I still think tipping bin men is weird.
People agreed with me. Anyway, this isn't a film about tipping your bin men. A podcast about tipping your bin men.
Fuck tipping culture.
Your interview technique is great for a politician, but not for fair debate. Is
all I'm saying is the boys and me came to a decision that by saying supernatural comedy, all you're really doing is doing like a roundabout way, roundabout way of saying horror by saying supernatural. That's what we came to the conclusion.
No! Why? A vampire doesn't mean horror. You can have vampires in something and they're not scary. Just because there's something supernatural in something doesn't mean it has to be scary.
But it doesn't have to.
I just watched that bloody thing with Miranda and it was alright. It's not fully my kind of thing, but what's the show? The Addams Family Netflix TV show.
Oh,
what's her name? Wednesday. That's all supernatural, not scary. It's not a horror. Just because there's vampires and crap in it doesn't make it a horror. You're telling me that's a horror, are you?
No.
I rest my case.
But I would then say it's a horror comedy because it incorporates horror elements. But I've not actually seen it.
Incorporate horror elements.
Well, I've not seen it. I can't say neither for or against.
Yeah, but you're saying by having a vampire in it, that itself is a horror element. No.
Well, it is an element of horror.
A vampire doing a horrific
They fucking kill people and steal a kid.
Yeah, what do you believe? People die in Rush Hour. That's not a horror. They kill people in Rush Hour. That's not horror.
Right. So no. Right. So
it doesn't try and scare you.
No. The act of a vampire killing a human and stealing a kid, and also, by the look of it, turning that kid into a vampire is not horror related at all to you as well. That's what I'm saying.
And a mafia person killing Thor, where his dad goes and kills whatever race he is and takes Loki, his son. That's horror, is it? Because he went and killed his family and his race and kept the baby. That's a horror.
I mean, that's just shit, but
And he's a mythical god thing, aliens, so supernatural maybe. But again, it's not horror. It could be horror if it does it in a horrific.
Supernatural. That's more like scientific, isn't it? Really?
Do you mean they're fucking aliens?
Yes, but aliens aren't supernatural. Supernatural's like ghosts and shit. Aliens are grounded in some sense of reality.
I agree it's not supernatural, because it's not. But it's also not horror, and that's my point. It's the exact same thing that happened. You just switched the alien for a vampire. And the point is, it can be made horrific. It could have been made horrific in Thor if they tried to make it scary when it happened, but they didn't. It's just part of the story, but it's not being horrifying in delivering the story. It's just what happens. We're gonna have to get people involved on this.
I can see what you're saying. I can see what you're saying.
Thank you. And I can't see what you're saying. Therefore,
I can see what you're saying. However, I can't be wrong if so many people class these things as horror comedy.
I think people just haven't thought about it. Like, people just gave it the title of horror comedy, but when you break it down, it's like, wait a minute, that's not right. And maybe it's because at awards ceremonies, they go, right, best horror film coming up. You can't say best supernatural film.
All right, so I've got a question for you. How would you fucking... So, there's a film that I want to get you to watch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And without spoiling too much, it involves the process of...
We'll have to revisit this topic as we watch some more horror films.
It involves the process of a man and his neighbours believing their other neighbours are serial killers. Now, how would you, on the basis of what I've just said, because it can't be supernatural, can't be a supernatural comedy. Nope. So how would you class it then? You can't just class it as a comedy.
If in the scenes they're going round and it's dark, and like they're going to jump out and murder, and there's going to be like what's it called? Friday the 13th. That's horror.
I'm going to save this discussion.
I have to see.
And we're going to watch it.
Yeah, we're going to have to watch other things
because I'm really curious now how you really define that one.
Yeah, we'll have to add it to the list. I feel there might even be people that were dead on your side because of just that's how things have been defined in the past, but may have been swayed because I don't think it's a horror.
That stick with me after hearing your nonsense.
Maybe, but I just didn't think it was a horror film. I don't think it intended to be a horror film. Like, read your mum's review again.
Okay, so my mum's review for this is great soundtrack, mix of humour, vampires, and some great one-liners. You're either in the David or Michael camp, but either one will keep you on the edge of easy.
So for a film that's meant to be a horror film,
but she's already seen it like a million. Film. She's seen it a million times, though.
Right, but if you had to give a one-line summary review of the film, doesn't sound like a horror at all. There, does it? No elements of horror in that review, and it's her favourite film of all time.
But she doesn't see it as a horror because it's a horror comedy.
She doesn't see it as a horror. Yeah, but if it's you can't use the word horror and then say it's not a horror. But if you had an
horror adjacent
and it was purple, it wouldn't work.
It's horror adjacent.
Adjacent means not it.
It's horror adjacent. It takes elements of horror to make it thing.
Well, then it's not adjacent; it's connected to. But what are the elements of horror? That's what I want to know.
Well, we've already you have asked me what the elements of horror are.
Vampires.
Well, you've already decided that my verdict isn't right, so I can't give you. I can't say what I think's right because you've already flat out said.
If there's one reason now for wanting people to actually listen to this, other than just enjoy watching films with you, it is got to be to get more viewpoints on this.
I'm just like you put me in an impossible situation there because what do you think? What do you think?
You brought it up.
No, because this is how it works with you, right? As it stands. What do you think makes it a horror then? Me. I think the fact that it has vampires, death, and it's all incorporated is the horror element. No, you're wrong. That can't be right.
No, I'm saying... I don't just say you're wrong. I said a vampire on its own is not horror, and death on its own is not horror. They're in lots of other films and shows, and they're not horror, but they're still used in the show.
I think
I didn't just say no, you're wrong, and didn't provide a counter argument. I provided a very strong counter argument.
I think that it is an element of horror. A vampire is an element of horror. Well, yeah,
then you've got to give it every. Like,
well, yeah, it's like you have a martial arts comedy.
List of genres: action. Yep, there's action in it. Adventure. Yeah, I'd say there's elements of adventure in it. Comedy. Yep, there's comedy in it. Crime and mystery. Yep, there's a mystery of vampires going on. So now it's crime and mystery. Fantasy. Yep, I'd say there's fantasy in it. There's vampires.
Oh, that's it. Liv, right now. I remember what Liv said.
So now it's got every genre in
it. I remember what Liv said now. She didn't directly agree with you, but she didn't agree with me. Not. She defined it as a fantasy film.
Yeah, I said fantasy to you as well.
No, she's on its own. Like, she just said fantasy.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's completely fucking wrong. Because
I think supernatural comedy is better. But I'd say it's
not
less
fantasy.
Wrong.
Fantasy's fucking Lord of the Rings and stuff.
Well, vampires can be fantasy, can't they?
And it's horror, mate. It's horror.
I mean, I've never watched it, but Twilight. I just searched the genre of Twilight, and it says it's a fantasy romance. Doesn't say horror anywhere because it's got vampires in it.
No, it's a marketing
vampires
thing,
are in it, but it's about fantasy and romance.
If a girl's not going to go and see it.
I don't want to watch it. I have no interest in it. I'm just
saying
it's not a horror film because there's vampires
it's marketing. It's marketing. A girl's not going to go and see a horror
and
film.
Wolves in it, all I know, and I'm sure they fight and kill each other. That doesn't make it a horror. It just says drama, fantasy, romance.
We opened a kind of worms.
I never thought that flipping Twilight was going to back me up at some point.
I just feel
I'm not proud of it, but
I feel like Liv is like more than you is rubbed me the wrong way with this. It's not fantasy. Fantasy is fucking sword and sorcery and stuff like that.
Look, I can say there's a little bit of. I can say there's a bit of fantasy in it because it's vampires. It's not the real world.
That's not fantasy, right?
I'll give it to you.
I'll give it to you as a supernatural possible.
The faculty of activity of imagining things, especially things that are impossible or improbable. Right, so that's a vampire. So technically, you could say fantasy. I agree with you. It's not. I wouldn't call it a fantasy film because really, you could say it's every genre of film. Almost every film has elements of some sort of genre in it. But I'm just saying, you just can't say that's a horror film. It's an action, supernatural comedy.
I mean, I can't allow myself to fully agree. I'll.
I feel like I've got you a bit though. I feel like you're slightly on the hook.
I'll give it to you.
I'm not reading you all the way in.
I'll give it to you for Mona the Vampire. It's maybe not gateway horror, but I mean
gateway supernatural. Yeah.
Twilight, I mean...
Fantasy, romance. Here it says, I'm annoyed that it's still on my screen, it's given it loads of genres now. It says fantasy, young adult, romance, fiction, paranormal. So, again, still not horror in it, but there's vampires and wolves that murder each other in it, I'm assuming. They're fighting, I think. I've not seen it already.
I mean...
But it's not a horror.
They're all, aggressive vampires in Twilight. So...
And it's not a horror. The film itself doesn't even call itself a horror.
I mean, how the fuck we've got? I mean, the fact that we've gone from a proper quality vampire film to talking about fucking Twilight, man. And you know what? Yeah, I'll give it to you.
You may be
Twilight can have the fantasy fucking moniker because. I don't want that in the horror genre anyway. Thanks,
Fair enough. That we can all agree on. See, we've all got common ground.
But you have raised a genre there which I feel more comfortable with than supernatural. Paranormal comedy. I'd be okay with that. I'd settle for that.
Yeah, but paranormal's more ghost, isn't it?
Well, no, not really, because I mean, X-Files is based on paranormal investigations. There were fucking ghosts of not.
Paranormal powers, phenomena such as telekinesis, clairvoyance, that are beyond the scope of normal scientific understanding. So I guess again, paranormal and fantasy almost go
they
hand
certainly
in hand.
had super strength when they ripped off that thing and killed the couple and the security guards. So so.
But for a vampire, it's average strength. It's just super to us.
Well, I'll accept paranormal comedy.
Okay, paranormal supernatural comedy. That's fine. But supernatural.
No. Forget the supernatural shit.
All right, I'll say. Okay, so you've agreed, therefore, not horror comedy. Oh, my only argument was at the start was it's not a horror film.
I still think, in my personal opinion, that you can have horror elements, but the problem is that
horror elements without being a horror film.
The problem is that the horror elements that I believe are in the film, you're telling me are not horror related. That's my problem.
Vampires themselves aren't horror, and you've agreed with that by Mona the Vampire and Twilight.
But the element of the vampires killing the people in The Lost Boys is where the horror element is for me.
Well, the vampires killing the werewolves. Some teenage girl could say is horror for their horror.
Well, that doesn't happen at 12.
It doesn't happen. You're saying vampires and werewolves don't kill each other.
Not on screen. Not on screen that I can remember. But it has been a while.
I'm doing a lot of googling in this. An unnamed vampire is torn to pieces by the Volturi in the new moon. Torn to pieces.
So that's not the first Twilight, though, is it?
So what? It's still, under your definition, horror.
Well,
the original Twilight villain, Lauren, is killed by the werewolves at the end. But other than that, every fatality in New Moon is meted out to a minor unnamed character. So there you go. People are torn to death, and the main character is killed by the werewolves.
I don't think you actually see it on screen. No, it's probably written in the books or some shit.
Oh, it is. It just literally says it here.
Listen, you can't believe everything you read on Google.
Okay, now you're gonna start going fake news in a minute. We've gone a bit too far. I just don't think The Lost Boys is a horror, and I'd love to hear other people's views. Maybe you're fully on Rob's camp and you think it's a horror film. Shut up. Or maybe you started to be a little bit swayed by me.
I think over the coming weeks, I'm gonna have to address this situation with multiple people. We'll do like a sort of like a survey.
No. I'm banning you from bringing this up with anyone if I'm not a part of the conversation.
What if I create like
I'm not
a survey
having a politician. I don't like the way you're going to word it, though. We need to agree on the wording.
We'll agree on the wording.
We'll have to draft it up together. We'll have a meeting. We'll get legal and HR in, and we're going to draft it up. And we both have to agree before it's posted.
Well, on that note, we'll see you in the next one.
On that note, that was our podcast about genres.
Yeah.
I mean, The Lost Boys.
It is The Lost Boys adjacent.
The Lost Boys adjacent. Oh, God. Roll the credits.